Welcome, everyone. This is David Reichel with the Sierra Avalanche Center. I'm psyched to be here today interviewing Victor McNeil with the Wallowa Avalanche Center. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks.
Awesome. So real fast, Victor, we're going to be talking about the Wallowa Avalanche Center and your role there as the director. You're a native Oregonian. We met on a volcano in Northern California over a decade ago. We don't need to reminisce exactly about how long ago it was because it was a relatively long time ago now. But I'd like to get started before we get into all that by addressing some of my fear of missing out, my FOMO. I saw some awesome photos you posted from North American summer, South American winter a few months ago in Alta Patagonia, I think it was. So what was your most recent adventure down there?
I went down to Chile and Argentina with my wife for a month for a ski trip, and it was kind of like half just personal fun trip, and then we spent the second half working for a guide service friend of ours. So we were ski guiding down near the Bariloche area, and certainly the highlight for us was we had 5 days at the Refugio Frey, which is not too far from the ski area there in Bariloche, and had some amazing weather and great spring skiing conditions.
The Frey zone's like sort of unrationally high on my personal favorite places around the world. My dog is named Frey. Uh, for your personal scale, like how beautiful are those couloirs?
Well, it's pretty stacked, as you know. I mean, proximity to the hut, you can just, skin for 20 minutes and be boot packing up a, 1,000 to 2,000 foot line that's about as steep as you want, 35 to 60 degrees with some lines that have, mandatory air over a rock choke. So it's pretty unreal.
I spent quite a bit of time down there, and it's not always the best snow, but if there's blue sky, it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. I mean, even if the snow's like marginal, I've had incredible days just because like it's hard to have a bad attitude when you're looking at those views.
Right. Yeah. No, it's an amazing location for a hut. And when we were there, we were basically just waiting for the sun to warm things up. But it was great access, easy, didn't have to worry about stability. It was warming in the late morning, early afternoon. So we got to ski some really fun lines. And yeah, like you said, it's just a beautiful location. So you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for indulging me on that. I missed that zone. Looking forward to get back someday. Let's come back to the Northern Hemisphere, I guess. How long have you been the director of the Wallowa Avalanche Center?
I started in 2017.
All right. And can you explain roughly for those of us who are not as familiar as we should be with the Wallowas, like where they sit, what are the mountains like? What's the general sense of the geography?
Yeah. So the area that we forecast for is located in Northeast Oregon. It's right along Highway 84 between Pendleton and you're headed towards Boise. So we forecast for the Blue Mountains, which are lower elevation, typically around 5,000 feet. Then we forecast for the Elkhorns, which are a subset of the Blues. That's where Anthony Lake ski area is. Those peaks are higher; they go into the 9,000 foot range. And then we have the northern and southern Wallowas. So that being kind of the area that most people would probably be familiar with.
And so in terms of snow, this is not quite coastal, getting in intermountain. How does that sort of work out for you?
A lot of times it kind of depends on the year. If we have, early snowfall that sits on the ground for a long time, then our snowpack, especially early season, can behave much more like an intermountain snowpack. If we have a good year with consistent snowfall, especially by, say, later parts of January, early February into March, I would call some of our areas more of a maritime feel. But we have a fair amount of distribution too between the northern and southern Wallowas and the Elkhorns and the Blues. So each of those zones, we forecast for, they're all broken out on their own because of that reason.
Yeah, like looking at the your forecast maps, like you do have different zones. The Sierra Avalanche Center, what I'm most familiar with, and where I work, we just have one forecast zone. Um,
Mhm.
but you do different forecasts for different areas. Um, what's the range? I mean, do you generally have like pretty similar, or because of the distribution of snow and depth and all of that, those factors, do you often see like significantly divergent forecasts for the different areas, or?
So I'd say the big difference for us is the between the northern and southern Wallowas. So the northern Wallowas, are on the rain shadow side, drier, less snow, and colder. So it's not that uncommon to have that intermountain snowpack last longer into the year. Whereas down in the southern Wallowas, because most of our storms are tracking out of the west southwest, deeper snowpack, warmer. So that snowpack oftentimes behaves more like a maritime snowpack. We still get um, faceting occurring in the surface of the snow that gets buried, and that can happen in both the northern and southern Wallowas and the Elkhorns. And that's primarily just product of the elevation. But then the blues are so much lower in elevation, they can get a ton of snow. Like if we have a due west flow right up the Columbia River Gorge, there's a snow tell site in the blues that is always typically always has the most snow water equivalent of all of our snow tells, even though it's not that high, maybe 5,000 feet. So the blues are more subject to rain on snow events. We get a lot of snow there, but it's typically warmer. So there's definitely days when the forecast bottom line is pretty similar for all those areas, but there are certainly parts of the winter where it gets pretty dynamic, and we've got different conditions going on in all these four areas, and so we're having to write different bottom line, different problems, and different danger rating for those four areas.
And how is your staff sort of structured generally to handle that?
Well, I'd say we're on a serious budget, but we have a pretty amazing crew, which we're really lucky to have. So none besides myself, I'm the only truly paid staff member and forecaster for the Avalanche Center as the director and lead forecaster. The rest of our forecasting team, they just get paid as employees per forecast. So they kind of do it as like almost like a stipend sort of thing. So they're not on the payroll for a certain amount of hours per week or per month. And most of these forecasters also work as area instructors, course leaders in Northeast Oregon, and work as ski guides. So, for all of us, we're in a pretty small area. Resources are limited financially, so we all kind of do a variety of jobs, wear different hats to make enough money for ourselves, and b to get all these different jobs accomplished.
Yeah.
But to go and maybe better answer your question, we have there's about 5 or 6 of us that are writing the forecast. So, and then in terms of how do we figure out what's going on in these different zones, we try and focus a little bit on sending forecasters to different areas, because geographically it's a fair bit of driving to get to these different areas. So different forecasters will kind of focus in on one area or one zone a little bit more, and then we just are constantly sharing information and what we're finding out in the field.
I mean, it's a true, I think in all avalanche centers that people are wearing multiple hats for sure. And definitely, in a smaller avalanche center, it's even more necessary to do that. And
Mhm.
especially if you're covering a big geographic area with, like we just discussed, different elevations, different zones, it's what's required.
Yeah.
So what are your users like? Where are they coming from?
Well, we have we've got the local contingent, so there's quite a decent population of backcountry skiers, snowboarders, Nordic skiers, snowshoers. I would say that population is definitely surpassed though by the motorized community. So not necessarily all those motorized users are going into avalanche terrain. Um, some of them may, pass underneath the occasional avalanche, slope while they're out trail riding. But there's quite a few, snowmobilers and snow bikers that are accessing our forecasting zones. And then we have quite a few folks visiting. So there's a hut system in the Wallowas, and so there's folks from Portland, Seattle, Boise, who are coming for a hut trip for skiing and snowboarding, and then we have quite a few folks visiting, especially like the halfway southern Wallowas area for snowmobiling. So it's kind of a mecca for snowmobilers. So there'll be out of state plates from Idaho and Washington there, and then up at Anthony Lakes, there's some really good side country in that area, and that's become more popular just with the Boise crowd, people from Hood River, white salmon, that sort of thing. So we have a pretty, a lot of people coming into the area from outside of our little zone.
Yeah, that's, I mean, been my impression from totally from afar as well, that like, the Willawas are not super well known, but for people who know, they know that you've got the goods, and like it's
Mhm.
definitely an attraction beyond its like local population. I mean, Tahoe
Mhm.
as a resident population, I think is bigger than your area, but certainly Tahoe is, most of our users don't live here, right? They come in
Mhm.
to visit, and I think that's true for many of the avalanche centers, obviously, where larger communities visit there. Um, how can you, I'm curious about like outreach for these different user groups, especially with both kind of maybe comparing and contrasting your local population. What sort of efforts do you do to reach them, and then also the folks who drive in from
Mhm.
farther away as well?
Mhm. Well, I think um, the locals are pretty well tied into our organization, especially if they're kind of your traditional users. So that being the skiers, snowboarders. Um, the motorized community, not as much, but I think that's not unique to our area. I think that's just across the board. It's my feeling. Where avalanche centers have historically not done as good of a job as we could have of writing our forecasts and reaching out to that user group. So, that's been one of my big pushes in the last couple of years is when we write the forecast, and this is important for all of our forecasters, we're not just writing this to, one demographic, one user group. We're trying to target all of the folks that are going to go out in the mountains. And if we do a good job of that, then they're going to have more buy-in. So we've got kind of two parts to that. We're on avalanche.org. So if people are coming from outside of our area and they are familiar with that resource, then hopefully they will look us up on our website and look at the forecast and the danger rating and the bottom line and get kind of tooled up before they come. A lot of folks who are coming from more of the true maritime environment, I think it is really important for them to, do some research and reading before they come out here, because if they're super used to a maritime snowpack, they could get caught off guard, but on certain years specifically. So I think also through our social media channels, so through Facebook and Instagram, people stay pretty tuned into that. But I feel like if folks are coming out, especially for a hut trip for skiing and snowboarding, they are looking at our page in the weeks leading up to their trip, so they have a good idea of what the snowpack looks like. It's hard to say though, how many of the snowmobilers are doing the same. You can look at the Google Analytics, but we don't really know, what their user type is. So that part is hard.
Yeah, we have, obviously a version of the same conversations in-house here, and there's so much we don't know, right, about our users, how many there are, who they are exactly, and how they're using the forecast. And we have lots of anecdotal,
Hmm.
information, but in terms of really having good data to know that some of these the answers to some of these basic questions, we will, I think a lot of us are largely in the dark.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, what are some of the classes that you all offer?
So we have, we've always done at least a handful of free awareness classes, just like pretty much every avalanche center out there. And we try and spread those around to the local communities. So we're basically primarily serving Wallowa County, Union County, and Baker County. And those would be the communities of like Joseph and Enterprise in the northern Wallowas. We'd have LeGrand would be in Union County, and then Baker City. Obviously, since the last 2 winters with COVID, all of those presentations have been online. So we've tried to have a targeted awareness presentation for the motorized community, and then a targeted presentation for the non-motorized. This winter, we're planning on doing a combo. So a couple of the Zoom based, probably for each user type, and then getting back into the community some more as well. We've done some like combo sort of like awareness presentations slash fundraisers in the past, which we're not raking in huge amounts of dough, but it's kind of a fun community event, get people together, get them excited and thinking about getting ready for winter. And then a couple years ago, we became a area provider for the Avalanche Center, which is obviously pretty unique for an Avalanche Center. But the main reason we did was there was no local provider for any sort of Avalanche, education. And so that was a need that needed to be filled. And whether it's good or bad, that's become one of our biggest sources of revenue for our Avalanche Center, which in turn has allowed us to grow, provide more forecasts per week. So that's something that we've done, and we teach Area 1 and 2 courses, rescue courses, and motorized level 1 and 2 as well.
Yeah, this year at Avalanche Center, here in Tahoe, there's a ton of providers, guide services offering courses for backcountry skiers and snowboarders and whatnot. But historically, there have not been any of those courses offered for the motorized users. So this year, Avalanche Center went through the same process essentially as you all, and recognized that was a huge need. And so we offer motorized courses because there's no other options. And we obviously, the whole point of an Avalanche Center is to share information to keep people alive. So yeah, we've also sort of recognized that as a huge issue and addressed it in a similar manner.
Yeah, that's great.
Are those courses filling both with locals and with your out of state out of region, folks driving in from different zones?
For the motorized courses or for any of them?
For all.
For all. Yeah, we certainly, we're only 3 hours from Boise, 2 hours if you're talking about Baker City. So we definitely get some folks from that area. We get some folks from up in Washington that'll come down, especially the snowmobilers. One thing about snowmobilers is they are not afraid to drive. And we had quite a few from up in Washington. Last year, we had one guy from, I think he was down in Southern California somewhere. A buddy of his who lives more local was taking the course, so he came up to do it. We had a guide that works out of McCall, and then we bring in an instructor who lives up in Montana, and then we had Jeff Hamilton, who also works for Area, and he is up in Washington. So yeah, especially the snowmobile groups. We have a strong hold of locals, but we've definitely, I think, partly because there aren't very many providers for motorized curriculum, we've seen a pretty good number of folks travel from pretty far away. But it's also interesting to me. We get quite a few of skiers and snowboarders from Bend. And there's there's not a lot, but there's at least a couple providers there in Bend. But I think either those companies are sold out already, or folks are just looking for an excuse to come over to Northeast Oregon. You know, they're like, hey, maybe this is an area we want to explore more in the future. Maybe we want to do a hut trip there. Maybe they already have, and this is just an excuse to come out for a couple days, see the terrain a little bit, and take a course. So
Makes sense to me. It's good
ah,
excuse. I'm always looking for good excuses to travel. I mean, one
mhm,
slight downside of doing this work professionally is that it gets a little tough to travel a whole bunch in the winter because we're
right.
busy in our with our jobs. But yeah, if you can sort of get a positive benefit of taking a course or whatever, of seeing a new zone and experiencing something different, makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so I don't want to get you in too much trouble, but Victor, can you recommend a secret stash that no one has ever heard of? Maybe not so secret, but like if someone like myself were to roll up to the Wallowas to look for some good adventures, what should I check out?
Hmm. Well, I'll just share with you the lowest hanging fruit that has pretty much been, everybody kind of knows about it. So I think the easiest places to go out in the northern Wallowas are from Salt Creek Summit. So there's a snow park that's at about 6,200 feet over there, and just a lot of really fun terrain. You can get into, above tree line, and there's near and below tree line skiing, different aspects, different elevations. It's easy to rack up a bunch of vert over there. And, you know, it's definitely gotten busier in the last couple of years, probably a lot to do with COVID. But, if you put your time in, there's lots of nooks and crannies out there to find some fresh.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Um, cool, Victor. Anything we didn't touch on that you want to share, or get in front of the SAC audience?
Sure. I guess the one thing is one of our biggest fundraisers of the year is the Eastern Oregon Backcountry Festival, and this will be, I think, the 12th year for that. Um, and it's a event that we put on in the winter. This year it'll be the first weekend in February. Um, and a lot of that event is over in Baker City and then up at Anthony Lake ski area. So it's a 3-day event. Usually we do a film night one, and then we have raffle and auction, and then we go up to the ski area on day two, and we have uphill downhill race, and that's in memory of Kip Rand, who was the director before I took over, who passed away in the northern Wallowas skiing. Big cornice broke and took him for a big ride. So we have the Kip Rand race, and then we have some free clinics. So like a companion rescue clinic, and then snowpack observation clinic. And those are taught by the WAC forecasters. And then we usually have there's live music at the Star Bottle Saloon that evening. That's always super fun. And then on Sunday we have kind of like a small tour groups, usually again led by the WAC forecasters, and we take people out into the local backcountry there and go for a ski tour. So super fun weekend. That's where we bring in a lot of our revenue that helps out with our general budget forecasting for the winter. So that's always a good time.
That sounds awesome. Thank you very much for plugging that, and we'll be sure to help spread the word a bit. Um,
Thanks.
thanks a ton for talking with us, Victor.
Yeah.
Cheers to an awesome
Yep.
winter.
Thanks. You as well.